But I think, sort of a main focus would just be to get your take on the industry challenges and the future outlook. So I think a key thing for me would just be, what you see the event industry is facing today, some challenges, and what they could do better.
As a whole?
Yeah, as a whole. I would also say maybe try to make it specific for exhibition news or exhibitors, because that's obviously where you're focused.
Yeah, sure. I was going to say, because I know more about the exhibition space than the other sites.
Yeah.
In terms of pertinent issues, I mean, there's the long-standing ones, of DE&I and sustainability, which are obviously forever talked about. I think sustainability, the issues are more convoluted probably than DE&I, because I think I think there's more confusion surrounding what a sustainable event should look like, or indeed how you make an event sustainable without jeopardizing the experience. I know that's a big piece which we're talking about this year. And yeah, I think it's also that piece about where the responsibility lies in terms of making an event sustainable. Should it be the venue? Should it be the attendee? Should it be the organizer? Should it be a mixture of all three? That's also something we've been covering in terms of exhibitors as well. The checklist now for organizers that they have to bring in some of these major brands to exhibit is actually jeopardizing the bottom line of a lot of shows as well, particularly for the independent organizers. If they wanted to, let's say, you take, I don't know, Spacecom or something ran by Hub Exhibitions, they're an independent organizer. They'll want some big old brands coming along there, but they'll need to tick all of the boxes from a sustainable point of view, which does end up really cutting their profit. And also they're wearing a lot of those costs up front. And therefore cash flow wise is a real nightmare for indie organizers. So I'd say that's a big topic at the moment. DE&I is just ongoing. That's for the battle for more equality in high up positions. I think that's a generational thing as well. So that's a tough one as well. You want it to be a meritocracy, but also you want to provide equal opportunity. And our industry is largely white male in the more senior positions, which is a legacy thing. And again, I think it's finding that balance between not treading on those people because they got there on merit, but also making sure that you provide opportunities for everyone, creed or colour. So I think that's an ongoing issue. I would say actually quite prevalent at the moment is the kind of asymmetric information between venues and production and organisers. Production's particularly bad at the moment. I find that it's a bit like the dentists in the fact that if your tooth's hurting, you don't really know what's going on there, and the dentist can pretty much tell you anything. You may need to get 3 or 4 extracted, but you have to trust them because you don't know anything about what's going on there. With production, you get these big convoluted bills with all sorts of extras thrown in there, which is technical jargon, and most organisers don't have the time or the understanding to really get through one of those and be able to hash out what's necessary and what's an extra cost that they've thrown in there. And some of the costs of production are insane at the moment. I mean, we get quoted 90 to 100 grand to produce an awards night, which is only really making about 230, 240. So it's like, well, who are we running the events for? Are we running that for the suppliers and the venues, or are we running that for our audience? So I think that's a big topic, is more visibility there. Venues launching against exhibition organisers is a big one, as you may have seen in our press recently. It's more prevalent, outside of the UK because of the exhibition model, in that a lot of venues are hosts and organisers. Does happen occasionally in the UK, but that's a big one. That's a real big one. the ownership of the show, the patent of the model, and selling on dates versus basically the venues blackmailing organisers into paying higher rates, or they'll just launch against them. That's been a forever issue as well. It doesn't seem to be improving. So yeah, look, and then obviously just the bounce back from COVID, which is, has meant we've truncated 2 years worth of events into 1 year for the first year, and we're still seeing that issue all the way along the supply chain. People dropping out of the supply chain over COVID, losing their businesses, but the same amount of business being there when they get back, and there being this kind of disparity between the supply and the demand. So the demand being higher, way higher than the supply, which means prices get extortionate. I mean, I I tried to rebook one of my venues for the following year, 2 days after my event, and they'd already sold the dates on, which, isn't really acceptable, but seems to be how it's going at the moment. So it's a bit of a dogfight out there. So yeah, there you go. So I'm giving you that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of the future trends and how event organizers or exhibitors can balance the sort of short-term initiative versus the long-term initiatives. I know for a fact during COVID, while I worked at Insurtech Insights, given that our main revenue had been in-person events, all of a sudden from day 0 to day 1, that was cut out. And we had to pivot very quickly, and we had to do webinars and create content from that. And that was sort of optimizing for the short term. But now after COVID, I feel now you need to balance both of them, because there is an opportunity for webinars, because it's a great way to warm up your audience and to create even more value and to drive more sponsored revenue. But I was just curious in terms of, what do you see them doing in the short term that they should be doing in the long term, and how do they balance it between sort of long-term strategies and short-term strategies?
Yeah, I think in terms of the events or in terms of their business growth, sorry.
In terms of their business growth.
I think it's tough. I think particularly for independent organisers, I think it's really tough to have quick growth that is sustainable. I mean, that I've only ever worked inside the exhibition or the events industry, so that's probably similar across most sectors. But I think particularly with events, because you're kind of bound to your show cycle, and cash flow. I think it's cash flow kills 4 out of 5, isn't it? 4 out of 5 small to medium businesses is what does them in, and cash flow is obviously a nightmare during most people's show cycles. So I think it's that challenge of, yes, people want to grow, but it's almost chicken and egg. You probably want more shows in your calendar to warrant having cash throughout the year, and obviously building a portfolio. But with every new product you bring on, you need to bring on an entire team that's going to sell it, deliver it, which is obviously an immediate cash output. And also, the setup costs are things you front before you ever see them. Talking about the future growth, when we...
Yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's just the issue, is you wear so many costs up front, and in like labor and build, and you don't really see the revenue till probably 3 months out from the show, or any major revenue. So yeah, it's a real gamble. Every time you want to grow, you kind of got to front it, and then you've got to make sure you can survive that fallow period where you're just doing outgoings. So it's tough. And then also you got to think about how you grow, where you grow, and whether there's actually a gap there. I think there's something like, you'll probably know better than me as the research head, but there's probably 30,000 plus shows, in the world. You think there's only 365 days a year. So there's pretty heavy competition already, and most of those will probably be looked at by the bigger guys that have the cash in reserve to be able to launch pretty freely. So yeah, I think there's probably an issue there in terms of the disparity between independents and the kind of top 10, top 15 companies that dominate quite a lot of the market share.
I see. And what is Match doing? Or are there any initiatives that you could share that has helped to mitigate for this risk?
In terms of what we actually do, or what we have learned from the market.
What you have learned from the market, and then if you could share what you're doing.
Yeah, look, I think a big topic in that respect has been geo adaptation. I think it's really important as a model to effectively franchise your shows without wearing as much of the risk. I think use of partnerships is also really important, and looking at joint ventures with trade associations in those sectors. I don't think you can really run a show, or at least launch it, without having a really strong relationship there, because they'll wear a lot of the marketing cost, a lot of the outreach, and sometimes we'll be happy to work on it as a joint venture, which obviously means that you could spread that risk across two parties. But look, geo adaptation I think is a really good tool to help grow as well, because you think if you're running the same show just in a different territory, you've got a proven model, you've got a proven base of exhibitors that already know what the show's about. Same with attendees, you know how to market to them already, and you can probably use existing relationships that allow you to cut costs already to just repurpose into a different region. So I do think that's probably one of the best ways to look at growing your portfolio. Again, that's something that we've looked at for sure. I mean, we've tried it a few times. We probably didn't get the regions quite right for Confex, but it definitely made us some money, and it helped us tide over those kind of fallow periods, like I said, by kind of putting it in one of the quieter areas of the year. So yeah, I think that's probably a good tool. It also means obviously you save on staff, because they can sell the same thing, they can market the same thing. So I think that's a good way of not having to bring in an entirely new team and onboard them and teach them about a different market as well. So yeah, I think that's a good cost saver, or at least a lower risk strategy.
Yeah. I wanted to touch a bit upon about measuring the success of an event specifically. And I was just curious to hear sort of what is Mash Media's approach, or your approach to measuring whether the success of an event is to satisfaction or not to satisfaction. For example, at Insurtech Insights, our key thing was not the revenue per se, but it was the amount of interactions that we managed to create with our sponsors to the relevant target audience. I'm just curious to hear if you had any thoughts about what event organizers can do to sort of make sure that they're succeeding with their events.
Yeah, I think ultimately you want to know. Well, I think it's two things. Ultimately, one, you want to know how much business gets done at your show. If you can measure that with any metric, I mean, saying that engagement is a way of doing it. Obviously, there's only so far you can go. You can't ask every visitor if they bought something from your exhibitors. Well, you can, but it's time consuming, so probably not everyone has the resource to do that. But I think, that's always a good metric for a successful show, how much business was done as a result of you being there and bringing together the community. So I think you can measure that with feedback forms. You can survey people throughout the year. So I think that's a big part. I think also something that we really try and work on is giving everyone a purpose. People register for the show almost habitually, particularly with Confex or or the Indie Expo, because they know the brand. They'll register, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they'll come along. And I think, we find it mad that the industry average is like 50% reg conversion, which, is kind of wholly accepted. Yeah. We're really trying to change that. So you want to give as many, instead of looking at that big number of let's get 8,000 on the reg and that will convert to 4, whatever it is. You want to look at that. You want to look at how many pockets that 8,000 is made up of. Relevant associations are there. Are there clubs there? Are there people that are coming specifically to see a specific content session or to meet people? You want to give as many people on that list a purpose to come along to, whether it's an AGM, whether it's a meetup, a mixer, an important meeting, because obviously that for us is more of a real registration than people signing up who can give or take coming along to the show. They're just coming to browse. So yeah, I would say get into your reg list and have a look at how you can provide people with a purpose, even if it is looking at their interests when they sign up and sending them, hey, here's 5 stands that I recommend you should come and see, because you said you're into production, you said you're into venue finding. Well, look, here's 5 that you probably don't know about. Ultimately, it gives them a little bit more of a purpose to come along, so you can kind of hang your hat on them being more bought into the show, I guess. Which it sounds simple, but we've definitely seen an improvement in our reg as a result of hosting AGMs and other activations in and around the show.
And how can you go about sort of giving that purpose better? I guess in marketing terms, I guess it's personalization. Making sure that you really tailor your message to the right audience, and that's where you give the purpose. How do you go about that? Is it you send emails out and then you do the research on those prospects before, or how's the process of giving that purpose?
Yeah. How do we give people purpose? Like I said, we like to use as many other advocates as possible that will, because ultimately it's a bit like testimonials. Yeah. People or reviews, a restaurant could market themselves all they like, saying we've got the best food in the world, but you would trust a Google reviews, saying that I came here, it was absolutely fantastic, everything was delicious. You trust that way more because it's effectively an unbiased opinion saying that they like the restaurant. So I think that's what we try and do as well. Instead of hammering people from us saying it's the best show in the world, you've got to come along. You want other people who own those subgroups to provide that purpose for the people that trust them. So like we had the Beam AGM there, and we did some stuff with Abco and with Event Profs Live. All of them, they own their little communities, and they provide an unbiased opinion on our show because it's just outright useful for them. So I think that's what we try and do. We try and provide as many advocates as possible and get them to almost sell the concept of going along for them. If that makes sense.
And what are the value propositions of those advocates? Why would they want to speak up the conference? Obviously, it's very obvious of the value you give as an event organizer, but are there any sort of tactics you can share if there's an event organizer listening out there who is looking to deploy this advocacy tactic?
I think gamifying it's always good. People are competitive, and people like being a name. Ultimately, it sounds vacuous, but people do. So, that play into people's egos and also, I suppose, choose the right people. You got to choose the people who are trustworthy opinions. I think, and also probably try and look as tactically as possible. Try and make sure that you've got your overall audience, and then you've got relevant subgroups that aren't really overlapping. So you can cover as much ground with as fewer advocates as possible. And then, with them, obviously, give them as much of a platform as they like. Because, again, people find that really useful for whatever reason, whether they're looking to build their own brand, their own business. You got to make sure that we're being useful for them as well, and we're not just leaning on them as a favor. We've always got to provide the advocates value. Otherwise, they're not really, one, passionate about buying other people in, and two, they won't come back.
Yeah. And in terms of content, we have talked about it to start with. How do you see event organizers or mass media leveraging content in a better way going forward? And how do you see sort of the content creation to distribution side of it tie it to sort of value proposition of the overall event?
Yeah, I think that would probably come into more effectively marketing the shows through our media channels. I mean, we're very fortunate to have 2 complementing media channels to our show, which we've kind of positioned over the last 5-10 years. It's always a challenge to use them more effectively. because we also operate as different portfolio directors here, sometimes we're a little one-eyed with how we market ourselves, but we're learning, that Convex should really be promoted through exhibition news and conference news and CMW and EW as a result, instead of us just hammering the same message through our Convex database, because people in that database I don't know if there's as much content worthwhile running through that, or if that should just be a kind of updates and news piece. But the bigger pieces of content we should run through effectively third-party media channels, which is what we had. It goes back to the whole testimonial model. People probably, like any organizer, it falls on deaf ears if you're getting an email every 3 days telling you to come to the show from the show. But if we run some big creative pieces with some kind of high-level exhibition organisers in exhibition news talking about the relevance of Convex, then again, it adds a bit of gravitas to that, and it adds a bit of context as well. So that's something we're really looking at this year, is trying to run it through the media brands instead of Convex as much.
Yes, yeah, it's an interesting thing. We're observing the same. We're helping an event that's in 3 weeks called Legal Tech Talk. It's their first event this year. They're going to have around 2,500 attendees. And what was interesting, so we also represent a solution provider on the content creation side. And what we figured out is actually the content performs almost at a multiple of 10x better if you distribute it through a media channel, such as exhibition news. Because people assume that you're not trying to sell them,
yeah,
and you aren't, right? It's just the umbrella for connecting the people and providing value. Hence, it's way more trustworthy versus a solution provider going out and creating content for the sake of creating content. People, unfortunately, are gonna assume that it's a wolf in a sheep's clothing. While if it comes directly through a news channel, such as what you're saying, there is so much more potential on that, because people know that it's from a media channel. All they're doing, they're just covering news. They're not trying to monetize the audience all the time. It was a very interesting point you're making, and we have observed the same as well.
Okay, nice. Yeah, no, it's something we're still working on, but yeah, that's definitely the way we want to start looking at things for sure.
Yeah. And are there any sort of questions that you wish I had asked in terms of Match Media? Something like a specific tactic that you guys have deployed that's worked really well for you that you think should be more sort of out there for others to leverage?
No, listen, I mean, we're a mirror of the industry. We're very fortunate again to run a show where people come to us with all their weird and wonderful ideas that they've tried. I think one thing that has been really great for me and for our model is I work with Simon Burton, who you may know. Fantastic creative head in the exhibition industry, and he's had this concept of these Power 100 models, and we've adopted that on the EN side, and essentially it's a way of gamifying it throughout the year. It's a point system. We pick out 100 of the most influential exhibition organisers or event directors in our case from exhibition organisations. Ones that we want to reward for being really active members of our community, but are also, prolific event organisers. And we create an exclusive group for them with the EM 100, and we give them everything that we have for free. We give them free access to all of our events, free access to all of our white papers, our gated content. We give them elevated press opportunities. We really look after them, kind of put wind beneath their wings, help them grow their businesses, their portfolios, that kind of stuff. In return, what we ask for is that they engage. They engage with our community. So they speak at our events. They help us judge our awards. They come along to Convex. They come along to the Indie Expo in a way, and we gamify that. So you get certain points for filling in surveys, certain points for coming along, blah blah blah. And that's been really good. It's the first year we've done it. I think we're probably looking at doing it, across a few of our brands, because what we realized was actually you don't need 4,000 people really to make an active community. You need probably 4 or 5 groups of 100 people that know their stuff and are really active. and are really keen to engage. So I think that's been really good for us this year. It's been a model that I think really works.
And do you think it's an interesting point you make with, few groups of 100 rather than, one big event? Do you think that's what the future will be more of, or will we see more sort of events that are just all about volume? And where do you see the value? Where do you see the differences? Like huge events, 12,000 people, like a trade show, versus those literally tight events of 80 highly specialized specific people gathering into a room together.
Yeah, I think specificity is really important now. Specificity on the audience. People generally like buying stuff that is as kind of honed in as possible. So I think that big number thing is going a little bit. It's funny, you chat to any exhibitor and they want both. So it's kind of, it's kind of tough to judge. If they get 100 of the right people in the room, they wanted 1,000 of them. If they get 1,000 people in the room and there's 20 students, there's also an issue there if they manage to speak to one of them. So I think you've got to take it with a pinch of salt. Exhibitors will always want quality and quantity. But in terms of what organisers want quality. They want a quality specific offering. If you can deliver 20 meetings with that target person within whatever company you want to do, organisers will definitely value that over bringing 1,000 into the room, but not having any of them engage and then being from a kind of wider stance.
Yes. And what are your thoughts on monetizing quality of meetings? I've seen that model a few times where
monetizing what, sorry?
Monetizing the meetings. So, for example, you sign up a sponsor, and then they say, "Listen, we're going to guarantee you 10 meetings with these people. It will be for this amount." What are your thoughts on that model?
It's so we've done it. It's what everyone wants. So it's it's not going to go away. I think some of the tech really helps that, but ultimately it is quite exposing. What we find is we've done specific schedules for people before. That does become very exposing because it's ultimately up to whether that person turns up to the meeting or not. Yeah. Again, you deliver 10 meetings. If you book someone with 10 meetings and you deliver 9 at the right time, then they'll remember the one that you didn't deliver. And that's fair. They bought 10, but it's regardless of it's kind of out of your hands. We try and we're not against the model, but I think you want to be as you don't want to chain yourself to you don't want to chain yourself to specific times and people if you can avoid that, because it's just too many variables. I think the concept of selling prearranged meetings is good, and if the sponsor believes that you've brought the right demographic into the room, then they've kind of just got to trust that the meetings are going to be with the right people. But yeah, having 10, 15, 10, 30 with the specific people, I think it's tough to facilitate. You definitely need a team to allow for that to happen.
Yeah. And are there any other additional things? This is almost the last question, but are there any sort of additional things that you have seen really increases the sponsor satisfaction? And are there any initiative that Mash Media has deployed specifically to offer not only just a badge and a name in the sponsor's name, but actually facilitate even more value? And you have touched a bit upon it already. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I actually asked this in my group the other day for my other event directors group. I said we looked at all of our sponsorship packages this year because I just thought, well, it's becoming we agreed as a team, it's becoming too insular as a kind of branding exercise, and sponsorship isn't really just a branding exercise. It should be about buying in and being an active supporter of the community. And I think probably a lot of event organisers got a little bit lazy with it and did just see it as largely putting branding and presenting whatever it is. But sponsorship should be before, during, and after the event. The event should just be the kind of precipice of it all, but it should start way before. If you're a headline sponsor of an event, you should be involved in quite a lot of the content side for me in the conception of that. Obviously there's a data element which you need to deliver, raw data. There's a profiling stuff. There's thought leadership that you need to be a part of. If someone's going to sponsor an event and therefore the community, they should be seen as a really active head there, as opposed to just someone who's placing their brand everywhere. So we're trying to do more of that, more exclusive content around sponsorship packages, which is unique to that sponsor, and more about why they're sponsoring, why they're supporting this corner of the market, as opposed to their logo.
Yeah. And what about, is it purely promoting the sponsor? Is it that type of content? Sort of see us at this booth, or do you want to book in a meeting? What about sort of more educational piece of content, such as like a report for a sponsor, and help them create that before the conference? I know for a fact that was something we succeeded with quite well, Shirting Insights. So just curious, there's also the educational part of it where, you make the attendees familiar with the value that the sponsors provide. And also read this very interesting survey where, it requires the average of 16 touch points for a sponsor to convert from an event lead. Furthermore than that the majority of attendees are actually anticipating some kind of live demo at the sponsor event itself. And the point was mostly, what about the educational piece of content? Do you see that being a part of the sponsor journey and helping them maximize the value? Is that something you facilitate?
Yeah. I think if it's organic, then yes. I think some sponsorship deals aren't. There's no real scope to educate people on some, and I think if there's no scope to educate people, then we shouldn't crowbar it in. But yeah, I think if there's a hint of education, if it's a conference, for example, then yeah, I think education is a big part of it. But I think sometimes people just want the selling opportunity and the profiling. So, it should be consultative, really. I think there should be a framework that people work to, which is across all of those 5 channels and disciplines, but also, shouldn't be stringent on it. If people don't want those certain parts, then you should tailor it, but particularly if you're selling headline sponsorship, because it should be a collaborative effort, I think.